Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us once again in transforming the world through reflections. Today, our focus is on the arts and activism. So frequently, they go hand in hand. And my guest is someone that I just love talking with. We've had the best conversations, and we are bringing it to this stage. Here with us is David Heredia. He is an artist, specifically an animator, and he's also an activist. And we're going to jump right into this. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so glad that you're here.
Finally.
I mean, finally, from the moment we met, we've had so many great conversations, and I'm glad that we're able to bring it to this platform so that we can invite some folks into reflection, right?
Absolutely.
So, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm really excited to any opportunity that I get to speak about the work that I do
Mm-hmm.
and the relevance of why I do it. It always excites me, and I hope that it inspires other people to, take a similar path because I'm not sure how much people realize, artists in particular, the power that they have
Yes.
with the work that they create.
Yes.
And sometimes you see somebody creating a piece of artwork and it just moves you. It can trigger something. It makes you feel happy or nostalgic or whatever. But to have the power to make somebody feel that, oh man, that's so you inviting me here to talk about that? It's like, yes, of course, let's do it.
Yes. And as you know, just being around artists is something that energizes me so much. I have learned so much working with artists. And so I couldn't wait for this conversation. Something that has stayed with me is s- somehow pain and healing are tied to the arts. I cannot imagine learning about it, the pain and the healing, without the arts. And although the pandemic is slowing down,
Yeah. Hmm.
we're still in it. Um, the arts have been essential
Yeah.
in moving through it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm wondering what you would share about that.
Well, when the pandemic first hit, I had just released my children's book with Scholastic, Little Heroes of Color,
Mm-hmm.
and they had me set to do all these book readings in different locations in New York. I got to do two of them, three of them,
Okay.
but everything shut down, and all of my workshops, all of my speaking engagements, everything was canceled, and I lost thousands of dollars. And I work for myself, so it's like I don't have the comfort of knowing every 2 weeks I have a check coming. If I don't work, that check is not coming.
Exactly.
So when this happened, I was like, oh man, like what am I supposed to do?
Right.
So, I was in my office and, my wife was super supportive and encouraging me and, you can do it. I know you can do it. But I didn't know what to do. And I think the biggest hurdle was I was feeling like defeated
Mm.
and I didn't know where to turn. So what I did actually was I stepped completely out of my comfort zone and I started interviewing other people. Like I was interviewing musicians, DJs. All I was supposed to interview Sonia.
Uh-huh.
She was going to be part of it, and it was the coronavirus interviews. And basically, what I was doing was just asking them, like, "What are you doing to get by? Like, how are you surviving through this? How are you feeling?" Um, just to see if we shared some commonality, because I knew that that would encourage me to keep going. Because if you're still going, then that means I can keep going too.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I started interviewing people. Oh my God, these interviews were horrible. Horrible. The
Mm.
lighting was off. The audio was not plugged in correctly. Just anything that could have gone wrong went wrong. But I learned so
So
much
much.
in that process. More than anything,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wasn't like, hey, you know what? I'm going to start doing films and I'm going to start interviewing people. But what I learned most importantly was I learned about myself.
Yes.
That when my back is against the wall, I show up and I work through it and I don't give up. So that was what helped me get through the pandemic. Was that experience. You know, I only interviewed for like 2 weeks. I mean, the information that the artists and the musicians were sharing was also very helpful. But, you know, we tend to look at our own experiences and how we're affected and how we either sink or swim
Right.
during that situation.
Right.
You know, and then that's how you get the strength to keep moving. So I think that those 2 weeks alone really was the catalyst for my getting through the whole pandemic, because after that happened, I was like, I can do anything, anything. You know, unfortunately, the George Floyd murder happened, and it put everybody in a completely different space. And prior to that happening, I had reached out to elementary schools, colleges, junior high schools, you name it. And I was trying to offer these workshops. Nobody wanted to talk to me. After this thing happened, and the teachers now had to speak to their students about discrimination, racism, colorism, and all these things.
Yes.
They didn't know who to turn to, and they were just grasping at straws. People started reaching out to me. Hey, David, we know that you do these types of workshops. Would you come speak at our school? And I'm thinking like, man, I reached out to you at least 5 times this year, at least. And now you want to reach out to me. But, you know, I don't harbor any resentment. I saw it as a great opportunity, and I took it. And so I started doing these workshops. And prior to that, my income was based solely on animation gigs.
Okay.
After the pandemic happens, all of my income is coming from teaching and educating other people. And
Beautiful.
I've never been happier.
Beautiful.
I've never been happier.
Beautiful. As I'm listening to you, David, I'm inspired, and I'm thinking about how many stories I heard about the opportunities the pandemic opened up for so many, not only for self-reflection, but also to notice more mentors, to notice more about, you know, what our gifts can do to serve others. You know, you noticed yourself going beyond animation by teaching.
It was scary.
Teaching, you know, and you said, okay, all these interviews, technically speaking, were not working out, yet you learned so many things. It informs how you move in the world now. It's huge. It's huge. It's so important to look at how the pandemic just prompted so many shifts.
It did.
So many.
It did.
I can relate.
I can relate.
I can relate. I can relate. This podcast was born because of the pandemic, wanting to reach out to so many of the people that I know who are brilliant. Their gifts are amazing, and to just invite us all to reflect on what was happening. And that was a way of supporting each other.
Yeah, that's true.
And many would share, like you, what new things they discovered they could do with their gifts.
That's huge.
Isn't it?
It's huge.
Talk about broadening your horizons.
I mean, you know, I think one of the things that, as a student in the arts, I was always taught to focus on one specialty. Do not deviate from that thing, whatever that is. Because, you know, if you get into the world of animation and you're a storyboard artist, that's it. That's what you do. You don't try to do everybody else's job. You do your own. And, I mean, there's good and bad to that. But when you're freelancing, when you're surviving by getting whatever opportunities you can get, you have to be able to do multiple jobs.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times we're afraid to try those new things because we know we're not going to be fantastic at it, and nobody wants to start from scratch. But it was almost as if the pandemic was giving everybody permission to start from scratch. Like, it's okay to start from scratch. You know, really start. And you're right, because I did use it as a moment to, you know, reflect more on, become more self-aware
Yes.
of not just myself, but my goals. Like, what do I want? Like, what do I actually want? Where do I see myself years from now? And actually coming up with a plan and realizing that animation, as much as I love it, is not what's going to get me to where I want to be. So, not saying that I let it go.
Right.
I still use it because it's a very powerful tool in educating.
Indeed.
And I use it when I'm doing my workshops, but the ability to talk and connect with people, especially students who, let's just be honest, they may not get that type of mentorship from their teachers.
Right.
It can be very impactful.
Right.
Like really impactful. And
right.
I've been blessed to witness that impact firsthand with my own kids. And so because of that, listen, let me go back a little bit.
Please.
Prior to me doing these workshops for elementary schools, I told myself I will never do a workshop for an elementary school ever. The little kids are brutally honest. If a button is off on your shirt, they will let you know.
They will.
I mean, it's a different type of public speaking. So I was like, I'm not doing that. And a matter of fact, my daughter's school had asked me several times to come in and talk. And I was like, I'm busy. I had nothing going on my schedule, but I just knew I wasn't going to be there. But, certain situations happened in her school, and it forced me to be much more involved with the curriculum. And seeing what she was being taught forced me to create my company, Heroes of Color. It was formed in 2015 because her and my other son, at the time I just had 2 kids, were not getting the education that my wife and I wanted them to get. And I was like, there's got to be another way, because it takes too much work and effort to try to get the teachers, the principals, the superintendent, and everybody to change everything like that. It's a huge task.
It's quite an undertaking.
So I was like, you know what? I'm going to start at home. And so I started talking to my kids about different heroes from different countries, different stories. We're at a point where my kids, we're in the car and they're like, Papi, tell me a story.
Oh,
tell me another story.
Amazing.
But they're yearning for it now. So the good thing is when they go to school, they're looking for it. So if they don't get it, hey, why aren't we learning about such and such? Or can you recommend some books so I can learn more about people from Ecuador or from any other country?
Any other country, yes.
Because they're looking for it.
Right.
And I think students in general, think that the professor or the educator is there to teach us, and whatever they say is scripture. We don't question it. We take it for what it is and move on. Yeah. But no, they're there to serve you.
Yeah.
So if there is a need that's not being served, then let's talk about this.
And hopefully it's a collaborative experience where, teachers and parents are working together in this process. Yeah. And we realize that, particularly living here in the U.S. and in certain communities where people of color are marginalized, they may not feel like they have access to have this kind of collaboration with teachers. And I know firsthand about the power of that kind of collaboration because my mother is a teacher.
Oh, wow.
And she worked so closely with parents. Wow. And to this day, former students who are now adults still in touch, and a lot of the parents. There's so much to be said about the power of collaborating, all the adults in this village. Right?
She taught here or in Panama?
Both.
Oh, man.
Both. And so I hear you when you talk about how important it is for parents to let themselves take that initiative and also to do it at home, where they share with their children these stories that keep our cultural riches alive, and it helps because then now, like you said, children will ask for it in school. And The pandemic, I'm hearing from teachers, is really moving the needle in terms of reevaluating curriculum
Yeah.
so that it truly includes,
Right.
really in detail, the stories of our people, because systemic oppression, of course, made its way into the academic setting,
Hmm.
so that we only hear what would keep things a certain way.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that, uh, as painful as it was to move through, especially the early part of the pandemic,
Yeah.
gifts are coming from that crisis, such as that. The curriculum taken to task, diversity and inclusion in the work setting taken to task,
Check that off.
right? So the world is watching.
Yeah.
The world
Absolutely.
is watching, and the pandemic really, put this magnifying lens on things. So we have to question. We have to question.
I think what's interesting is, that what I found with a lot of the teachers in New York, most of the workshops I do are for schools in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's almost as if they've been waiting for this,
Mm.
and they just either didn't know where to find it, or they weren't sure how they were going to include it. But
Right.
through these enrichment classes, because of the COVID, the government gave schools an extra budget so that they can do enrichment classes, mental health, all these things. So um, they had the funds, but they just didn't have anybody to conduct these workshops. So it was perfect timing. It was perfect timing, and I chose and continue to work with schools in New York because I have that connection. That's where I'm from. So anytime I'm speaking to these students and they're looking at me like, who's this guy on the screen? Well, this
Mm-hmm.
guy on the screen went to school in New York just like you. I went through the same public school system that you did.
Mm-hmm.
And because I believed enough in myself, I live here now and I'm making it because I said, and I had enough supportive people around me who said, you could do it.
Yes.
And
So
when you
important.
stay in your area and you don't venture out, you don't see possibilities. Like, it's harder to imagine yourself in that career that you are setting yourself, working towards, because you don't have anybody around you to like gauge like what is it like being in that industry.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those students were asking me these questions.
Wow.
What is it like to have your own business, and how do you find clients? And like, it's amazing. It's amazing, and I'm just really grateful that I'm able to share that with them, because I know when I was in elementary school all the way up until college, I had nobody that I could ask those questions to and get them answered. I took a couple of classes after I graduated in just various colleges and business classes,
Yes.
and I would ask specifically about freelancing.
Nothing.
Nobody really, they would give me like generic business terms, and I'm like, yeah, but it's a little bit different with freelancing, though. So a lot of it I had to learn on my own,
Yeah.
and it's just, again, it's great to see that there are a lot of teachers who are looking for this type of enrichment for their students, and then that the fact that there are students who, as you mentioned, it forced them to be a little bit more self-aware
Yes.
and check in with themselves and figure out, hey, what other superpowers do I have?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, what else can I do?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are discovering, hey, I can do this thing really well.
Mm-hmm.
It's giving you my 2 weeks notice. I'm out, right? We
I'm
just
out.
finished talking about an exodus that happens in different corporations,
Mm-hmm.
and that's part of it.
It's part of it. I mean, the pandemic really helped people see new ways of doing the
Yeah.
work they love and not settling.
Yep.
Not settling. You were talking about the students that were asking you questions, and I was picturing it, and I thought to myself, you know what? What power it has to feel free to ask the question as a student, and then even beyond asking the questions, just to look at you and say, this guy looks like me.
Yeah.
And so he's doing it. It's possible. It can be done. It can be done.
It's true.
And all that self-appreciation that comes with hearing someone like you and seeing someone like you and getting your books and seeing your website. What is your thought as it relates to, you grew up in New York, your roots in the Dominican Republic, right?
Mhm.
Uh, what comes up for you as you're doing this work?
You know, it's funny because I really didn't think too much about my Dominican roots when I lived in New York
Mm-hmm.
because I'm surrounded by Caribbean people. So it was just a way of life, right? It's a lifestyle. It's nothing you really
Yes.
think about
Yes.
until I was removed from it.
Mm.
Then I started thinking about it because I wasn't around it anymore. I started thinking about the foods, and I found myself calling my mother more frequently to get recipes and listening to the music and
Yes.
just, you know, trying to continue that to preserve that culture.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that I love so much about art is it really is a way for you to preserve your culture.
To preserve it, to tell your stories.
You know, and you know how they say a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe that. I really believe it because you can create a piece of artwork and just sit and watch it, and you know, all these different ideas come to your mind, or as I said earlier, it may trigger some happy thoughts or your
Right.
childhood or whatever,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And I when I create the work that I create, I'm very mindful of that.
Yeah.
And there's a story that I like to share, and I share it all the time, but I want to share it again with you. And it really does deal with representation and why it's important because
Yes. Yes.
it was 1997. I went on a job interview at the Harlem YMCA,
Mm-hmm.
and it was for an art coordinator position.
Okay.
And the director was looking at my portfolio, and he flipped through, and he was like, you know, looks good. He's like, but I have one question for you. Why are all the characters in your book white? All of them.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't know. Never even thought about it. And then for a little bit, I was actually embarrassed for a
Mm.
little moment because I was like, ooh, I didn't realize that I was even doing that. You know, and that's part of this systemic oppression.
Yes. It
It's
gets
ingrained in you,
embedded. Yes.
and you don't even realize you're doing it. My family didn't even realize it, you know. And when he mentioned that, I was like, I will never do this again. He says to me, you have the power to change people's perceptions of us with the work that you do. He said, but you can't do it because you're not even represented in your own work. He's like, you're creating it. Why don't you draw yourself? I was like,
Wow.
oh,
That's
man.
deep.
It was crazy.
That is
This is a
deep.
job interview, and he's telling me this, and I was like, wow, this is true. Like I didn't think about it, and then ever since that point, I made it a fact that every character that I did was a character of color. Not to say that I don't draw other characters, I
Right.
do, but just like when you watch TV and you watch the news and you look at a magazine, they're not going to be of color, or it'll take a while before you see one.
Mm-hmm.
I want it to be the first thing you see is characters of color. Like
Yeah.
that's my main thing, and I'm okay with that, you know. And when you take that path, when you take that route, when you make a decision like that, that is when you start sort of teetering into the side of activism a little
Activism.
bit. And it wasn't, you know, like I don't know. I never figured myself as the guy out in the street with the picket signs and, you know, like marching and all that. And I think that's great, but that's not for me. And I feel like there are other ways that you can, you know, sort of voice your opinions.
Yes.
And for me, as a creative, that's how I use it. That's how I choose to voice mine. My, you know, activism is through art, and it always happens when I either share a piece, whether it's animated or just a piece of artwork. There's always somebody that's bothered by it.
Mm.
There's somebody that's bothered by it, and it for a while I had a hard time understanding why, until I realized that anytime you take pride in your culture, it it makes other people uncomfortable, especially if they don't have that same sense of pride.
Yes.
But to see you so prideful and so, like, like, why are you doing that? Somebody asked me, why are all your characters black? Like, why not?
Why not?
Why not?
Exactly. You hear so much, especially with all this awareness that thankfully is spreading.
Yeah.
That phrase, representation matters. And it does
Yeah.
on so many levels. A child sees themselves reflected on TV, film, and it plays a role in their development.
Definitely.
Their way of appreciating themselves, their ability to appreciate themselves, It's very important. And so when that's happening, we're already healing centuries
Wow.
of embedded pain that's been unattended.
Yeah.
And so I thank you, David, because you're doing this. You are an active part of this healing process.
Thank you.
You see yourself as an activist. I've heard you say that there are many artists that don't necessarily see themselves as activists, even if their work inspires reflection in that kind of way. What would you say about that? That not all artists commit to that label.
Well, I think, it's something you have to think about with respect to not everybody is able to vocalize or express how they're feeling about a specific situation. And most artists are introverts. They're not able to speak publicly and comfortably. So they have a hard time just in general, not even talking about activism, just in general. Get up and talk about your artwork. What does that represent? And they can't tell you 2 sentences. And it's just part of being an artist. That's how we are.
You speak through your work.
That's it, and you fumble through it as much as you can, just enough to get a grade so that you can sit back down. I think part of why I'm able to speak is because my mother, when I was younger, she was in church. She was the one who would read the scriptures in the Spanish Mass, and she was giving the bread. And so I always saw her she was a leader already, but I saw her as a different kind of leader because she was up at that podium reading.
Right.
And, she always expressed to us, you have something on your chest, open your mouth. Like, get it off your chest. Don't keep it in.
Say it.
So that helped me. It gave me permission to speak, even if it didn't make sense, but I got it out. And so anytime I was in school and they were like, okay, David, get up, talk about your work. No problem.
Okay.
Let's do it. Okay, David, come, have a seat now. We need other people to come up. So I say all that to say that this work isn't for everybody. It's not for everybody, and that's okay. Yeah. If you understand where your strengths are, cool, stay there. Yes. If you really, like, when the protests were happening, I wanted to go because I just felt like, I don't know, I didn't know what else I could do. Like, I wanted to be a part of it. But my kids were like, we don't want you to go out because people are getting hurt, and we don't want you to get hurt. And, they were crying, and I was like, all right, I'm not going to, let's think about another way to do this. They're under 10 years old, all 3 of them at the time. So I was like, nah, I don't want them worrying.
Yes.
So I told them, I was like, look, there are other ways that you could express how you're feeling, through art, through music, through poetry, whatever you're feeling. And so I started creating, different pieces of work. And then it turned into a story.
Yeah.
Who's this guy? Well, this guy or this girl did these things, and in my mind, if I'm actively educating my kids and my wife and I are working towards, getting their minds right, then I'm doing my part. I may not be out in the streets with a sign protesting, but I'm doing my part because I'm going to tell you, and I'm not a therapist, but I'm going to make the assumption that the majority of the problems in this society could be, I shouldn't say could be, but start at home. So if you have parents who talk with you and give you the space to express what you're feeling when you're feeling it,
Yes.
you'll be much more aware of who you are, what you want, what you like, what you don't like. But if you don't have that space at home to talk about what you're feeling, what you're going through,
Right.
what you're scared of, and get that encouragement, then you're going to get it somewhere else. You're going to get it in the streets. And then there's where problems begin.
Exactly.
So I feel like, and even my videos, the Heroes of Color videos and the book and all that stuff was really done for my kids first. It wasn't about, oh, I want to make money. I want to be rich. I want to sell books. It was, hey, this is going to help my children understand that this is the type of stuff they should be seeing in school on a regular basis.
Period.
Not just Black History Month, like on a regular basis.
Exactly.
They should be seeing this type of stuff. So when they don't, they feel safe enough and confident enough to ask the teacher, why aren't we getting this?
Yeah. You're raising children that are confident in their ability to question.
And that's the key right there. That's the key. And my mother gave that to me and my 4 older brothers.
Beautiful.
By giving us that space to talk. So my wife and I want to give that to our kids. That's the best gift in the world.
That gift is priceless. And I have to tell you, I join you in that assumption that, yes, that the influences at home are powerful. Yeah. Not the only influences, yet extremely powerful. Yeah. And it sets the tone for the way we move in the world into adulthood. Yeah. And it's really important that as adults, whether we've brought children into the world or not, we're mindful of the fact that we're being watched. We are being watched.
That's true.
And so if we want to be conscious of what we're moving forward to the next generation, it's so key to reflect. To pause and reflect. And if the pandemic did nothing else,
oh my goodness,
it invited reflection. Yeah. Not all pleasant, because if you've been avoiding it pre-pandemic, avoiding reflection, avoiding feeling your feelings, then to sit and be with them was quite jarring for a lot of folks. And that needs to be acknowledged. So it's important that you've been talking about the value of having a circle of support, so that things are explored safely.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, David, you and I can talk for hours because there's so much to cover. I would love for you to share with our audience ways that you can be reached. Let them hear the name of your website, your books for adults and for children.
Well, my website is heroesofcolor.com, and I spend mostly, I'd say, on LinkedIn, just under David Heredia, and then on Instagram it's _ Heroes of Color. And if they want to reach out to me, david@heroesofcolor.com.
Excellent. And as it relates to the freelancing, the name of your book. Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
so the children's book is called Little Heroes of Color, and it's available pretty much everywhere online. And the other book is called The Freelance Hustle, and that one's available at Amazon, but also on my website. And now the thing about that book is it was born, again, out of frustration because it was uncomfortable to graduate from college and not have any sense of business.
Right.
And I needed that. I really needed that to survive. And so I'm offering that to college students now who are looking at freelancing and being entrepreneurs and hopefully starting their own companies, because it's essential. I mean, college is giving you all the tools you need. Now all you need to do is figure out which tools you want to put in your toolbox and start building, but I think we're just trained to work for somebody else all the time, that we don't even look at our tools. We don't look at actually forming them together and say, hey, I can make this thing. I can build this, make this my own, whatever. And it's safer to just, I'm going to apply for a job, get a job, and then boom. That's
boom, boom. I mean, and that was a formula for generations.
And there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying this, but,
Let's look at other opportunities, right?
Exactly.
And, in your field as an artist, that's not the only space where entrepreneurship is dismissed, not discussed as part of the curriculum. It's also true in the healing arts.
Oh, wow, really?
Yes, and so thankfully you are inviting a wide range of professionals to not only reconsider the way they move in the world as business owners, or to even consider having a business, but because you address it with a sensitivity to diversity and inclusion, it's extremely relevant now that the pandemic is keeping all eyes open for accountability.
For now.
For accountability. Well, let's keep the faith.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, David, for being here. This has been amazing.
I can't believe the time went by so
right?
quickly.
Time just flies. And it's wonderful to reflect. And so for now, we end.
Thank you.
So as always, may we continue transforming the world through reflections. Thanks for joining us.